I did the assessments, care plans, MDSs. I went to the care planning meetings. I even did tube feedings. I did everything.
Welcome to NDTR Spotlight, the corner of the internet where NDTR shine. I'm your host, Maria Lorraine. Today we have Marsha. She is a certified diabetes manager and an NDTR with 21 years of experience in long-term care. She has her associate's degree from LaGuardia Community College, and we're going to talk all things long-term care. Today, she's the expert in the field. Let's get to meet her. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so we always like to start from the beginning. Take us back to when you first became an NDTR. What was the process like? How did you find out about the credential? And what made you enter into the field of dietetics?
Well, it was kind of by accident, honestly. Um, I was in school at the time at LaGuardia. I was actually doing prerequisites to go into the nursing program. And, when you're in those smaller schools, they only have a certain amount of seats in the programs. And even with my 3.6 GPA, I didn't make it in. So I had a friend that was actually in the dietech program. And she said to me, why don't you try this out? Because it'll take a lot of the classes you already have. And you won't have to start from the very beginning. I said, okay, I'll look into it. And I went and talked to the program director at the time. And it sounded like the right thing to do. And it has been 23 years later.
Yeah. It's so refreshing when I get to sit with someone who's been a diet technician for so long. You really have seen so much in this field, and long-term care has been your baby. So when did you enter into this niche or category of long-term care?
Um, Kind of another one of those moments when you just fall into things. I was getting out of school, and at the time, I mean, it was the very early 2000s. So there wasn't any, you know, LinkedIn. No, I mean, oh, blah, 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 blah. What do you call it? There was,
Indeed.
yeah, there was no Indeed. So, I sent out my resume to all the nursing homes and hospitals in the area, and I got a call from a nursing home, and I came in and I got the job that day. And I ended up staying there 8 years with them. And so it was a very good learning experience. I kind of ended up in the right place because that nursing home was 729 beds. It had a lot of different populations, including HIV, AIDS, Huntington's disease, respiratory unit. It had a subacute unit. I worked on all of them. They even had a renal unit and a dialysis center within the building. So I got a lot of experience for the 8 years that I was there.
That's some serious clinical
Yeah,
brain work there.
yeah.
All the things you listed off, I'm just like textbooks. Let me refresh my mind on all these. So as a diet technician in that position, what was your role? What was your day to day like for that job?
I pretty much did everything the RDs did when I was there. I had my own units. I had two long-term care units. I had the outpatient clinic, and I also, for a little while, I had the dementia unit, and then I ended up with the subacute unit. Um, I did the assessments, care plans, MDSs. I went to the care planning meetings. I even did tube feedings. I did everything.
Tell us about the tube feedings. We recently had someone recently reached out to me asking if they could do tube feedings as an NDTR. So that is a hot topic. How did you
Right.
fall into that, and how did you gain the confidence to do tube feedings?
Usually reserved for dietitians. I think because I was in New York and New York doesn't really have a licensure. I had a clinical manager that was very supportive, and she sat me down, taught me how to do it, and it went from there. I think I actually had a unit that had the second most tube feedings in the building, only second to the respiratory unit. So I ended up with about 13 or 14 tube feedings at the time. Yeah, it was fun. It was a very good learning experience. Very,
It
very good.
it sounds like it. I mean, so you made it sound so simple. You sat down and you just learned the tube feedings. You sat down and you just learned all these things. Give us some details on like what it's like to do tube feeding, what that assessment's like for patients, and what the dietitian does to either review, or is it how much how involved the dietitian is in those tube feeds that you did.
When I would do tube feedings, obviously, you look at their height, their weight. Are they eating by mouth at all? If they're not, then obviously everything is coming from the tube feeding. You pick a formula, obviously, that would provide what they need. And, if they're diabetic, you're looking at a diabetic formula. If they are a renal patient, you're looking at, like a Nepro or something like that. If they need more protein because they have wounds, you'd be looking for a formula that has high protein, if that's something they can tolerate. Then you go from there. You look at their needs, you calculate out their needs, and then you calculate the formula to meet their needs.
So you have 8 years of working with these very complex patients. What happened after that? Because you have 20 years experience. We want to know the whole timeline.
I stayed clinical for quite some time because, having young kids, it affords you the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. But then I decided that I got really tired of writing the same thing. Because, how many different ways can you write the same thing? When you're writing an assessment, you're basically following the same format. No matter what's going on with the resident, there's certain things that have to be in the assessment. So it started to get a little mind numbing, I guess I would say. And I said, well, let's look into food service. So a few years ago, I got up one day and decided I'm going to take the certified dietary manager's test. I looked into it, found out that with my degree and experience, I didn't need to take the courses. So
That's nice.
I just applied for it. They looked over my transcripts and they said, yeah, go ahead, take the exam.
So
So
let me get this right. You didn't have to take any courses or anything. The NDTR credential was, and your experience was enough to just sit for that exam and get an additional credential.
yes,
That's a nugget right there. That's a golden nugget for my audience. That's awesome.
right. So that's something you can do. I did it because I was finding that I was applying for food service positions, and I would apply for supervisor manager positions and I wouldn't hear anything because nobody knows what a diet tech is. Yeah. So I said, well, I guess if I get this credential, somebody might call me. And immediately I started getting phone calls.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've
Crazy
worked
what a credential does. What was the test like getting that credential?
it, I mean, they look at a lot of, it's more food service oriented, obviously, than clinical. There are some clinical questions because they do expect the dietary managers to be able, in some instances, to help manage some of the residents' nutritional needs. But it is definitely more food service oriented. So they're looking at, do you know temperatures? There's some management questions. Are you able to manage a staff, manage a budget? Um, Quantity food production, temperatures of foods and holding and things like that. So a lot of stuff that we already know is diet techs.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, the certified diabetes manager is basically just the food service, a little bit of clinical, but mostly the food service component of an NDTR's education.
Yes.
Okay, so it's something that they could easily add on. Did you need the experience or was the courses enough to get
The
that
courses
credential?
were enough. The
Okay,
courses were,
okay.
yep.
All right, I'm fascinated. So you had these 8 years of clinical and you were hungry for something else. You dove into food service. So let's keep going there. So you got the exam and then you got a call back as soon as they saw this credential behind your name.
Yep. Yep. I worked as a supervisor for a year. Then I became a manager and I was a manager for about 3 or 4 years. And kind of by accident, somebody just called me. I really wasn't even applying for a director position. Someone called me and said, hey, I saw your resume. We're looking for a director. Would you like to try? Okay, why not?
Yeah, that's so nice.
So I've been a director ever since.
So that's a lot of different fields, but specifically for food service, you went from supervisor to manager to director. So
Mhm.
what's the differences? Because they're all leadership roles, but what are
Right.
the minute differences that someone who's hearing the name might not know?
As a supervisor, you don't get into the purchasing of the food and contracts and things like that. You're more or less there to make sure that the staff is doing what they need to be doing and that the residents are happy with what they're getting. Um, as a manager, I felt I was a little more involved. I would do more of the tickets, the menus. I would get involved in some of the purchasing, managing the staff. Like I was actually hiring, firing if I had to, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So it really was nice to have the steps because it built one thing built on the other.
And so, director, what does that involve?
It just feels like no matter wherever you work dictates how much involvement you have. So yeah, it really does. Um, when I started out, yeah, you're purchasing, you're managing a staff, you're managing the kitchen, you're making sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I'm finding more now as I've moved on that I'm getting into a lot more deeper things. I had a actual financial meeting the other day, and I'm like, oh no, what am I supposed to bring? Where we actually through all the finances for the department, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is what it is. So as time moves on, as my career grows, I'm seeing that new things are happening, and there is some growth happening.
Is it more challenging or just more depth compared to the clinical part of being an NDTR that you found?
I think it's a little more challenging because you're not only managing yourself.
Ah,
Yeah. You're managing other people. This last week at my facility, my chef, I don't have a supervisor that I'm supposed to have. Um, my chef was out for a couple of days. So I was pretty much by myself and managing the kitchen, managing all of my work. And it was very fun. And he walked in and I hugged him, the chef. When he came back, I said, thank God you're here.
never leave again.
Never leave me again because it's a lot. It is a lot. You're making sure that the staff is doing everything they need to do. And then you have your own work to do. You have, you know, the schedule you need to get done. You have financial things you need to get done. You have ordering you need to get done. It's not just, sitting down with a chart and, you've talked to the resident. Now you're sitting with the chart and charting. You're, and then you have meetings to go to. But you still have to watch what they're doing. So
So it sounds like multitasking is a
yeah,
necessity
definitely,
in that position.
definitely.
So you mentioned that one of the challenges or one of the things that makes being in food service maybe a little bit more challenging than clinical is the management of people. And I know usually in school there's some talk of management courses and you have a little bit that's kind of talked about, but looking back, or if you could rewrite a curriculum or add to a curriculum for management, what would you tell an NDTR who's looking to go into food service?
I would probably tell them don't expect people to do what you would do.
Mm, that's good.
Yeah,
Elaborate. Tell me more.
it took me a while to realize that not everybody goes to work thinking I'm going to do my best today. So
Mm.
you have to sometimes take a step back and go, okay, you know, not everybody's thinking that. You have to push a little bit. You have to be supportive. Sometimes they're going through things and you become their counselor as well. So there's definitely a lot of roles that you take on managing a staff.
We talked about management. How is the nutrition component of your job being highlighted, your NDTR credential?
I use it a lot. I do
Yeah.
use it a lot. It's not like it goes away because you're in food service. I think it actually helps because a lot of times, and we always talk about nobody knows what a DTR is, but nobody knows what a DTR is. So a lot of times I find that nursing will come to me and they think that I don't have any idea of what's going on, but I do have a clinical background. So it does help for me to kind of bridge the gap between the clinical and food service.
And so with that, what are the direct avenues of nutritional quality? Like how do you ensure the nutritional quality of the food that is coming out of your kitchen is to the best of your ability for your patients?
Just make sure that the cooks are doing what they're supposed to do. Sometimes they like to get a little creative. Unfortunately, in long-term care, getting creative is not necessarily the norm. We do have moments when we can, of course, if there's a holiday or an event happening, but a lot of times they want to get creative because a lot of them come from restaurants and they're like, why can't we, do this? And, or I want to add a little salt to it. And I'm like, you can't, because we're feeding people that have different things going on, different ailments, and we have to make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs. And we don't want you having to do 10 different things because you want to add salt to one of them, you know?
Yeah. Putting in the creativity, but making sure it's still fun
Right.
for staff.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a lot of, and letting them know that if you just keep it simple, it's always a little bit better, because they always want to add things. And then I'm like, well, if you add stuff, then you're making actually more work for yourself. Keep it simple.
Another question that comes up a lot in food service is turnover rates, employees. And that's something that you reacted to. So can you kind of talk us through how do you experience that, and how do you deal with that? And how would you recommend a diet technician deal with that if they walk in the same position as you?
Um, well, turnover, I think, has always just been an issue in the industry, period, because it's for a lot of people, it's a job being a diet aide of just until I finish school, until I find another job, until I get the job I'm really looking for. So that has always kind of been there. I think the pandemic has exacerbated it. I think we've all seen out there where everybody's going, they want 15 to be the minimum wage. And I think a lot of food service has responded to that. I'm seeing a lot higher salaries as far as dietary aides are concerned. Um, but it's still hard to get people in the door. It is. A lot of people still don't want to work for $15 or $16 an hour. So you just try to adapt your department the best you can, to what you have. I have to say I'm lucky right now. I have a pretty decent staff. So I'm not feeling it, but I have. I'm not feeling it at the moment, but I have. It has been an issue.
That's a good point too, on what you kind of alluded to before about managing people and how you have to sometimes be their counselor and listen to them. So clearly there's an art to being a food service director and having the ability to relate to your employees and keeping them there.
Yeah, a lot of times honestly, recently I hired 3 new people and all of them are gone.
Oh boy.
Yeah, within a month or so, like all 3 of them are already gone. So, but like I said, I have a good staff that'll all fill in, that'll pitch in, that'll work, that'll do overtime. So it's it's not as hard on me as it has been in past positions. So I'm okay right now.
I'm so glad to hear you're okay right now. But tell us when it's not okay. What do you do to keep yourself motivated? You're benefiting so many people with what you're doing. What keeps you going?
The fact that you are benefiting so many people, they need you. That's where they live. They can't go home. They need you to be there to feed them. So like I said before, you just adapt the department to what you need to get done. You start to learn what your employees' strengths are, where they work best, and you might have to move things around. Sometimes I become the cook or the prep cook, or sometimes I'm a diet aide. It all depends on the day.
Being super flexible and just willing to roll with the punches that come.
Yep.
You had mentioned when we were in the document I have guests fill out that you are most proud of staying relevant with nutrition over these last 20 years, 23 years. How were you able to do that? I know you have different jobs, but what are your tips and tricks on staying up to date with the ever changing field of dietetics that you're working in?
I think just being willing to learn. I think those early years where I was willing to learn and I had somebody who was willing to teach me really helped. It developed a lot of skills that I had no idea were going to help me in the future, but they did.
I'm sure in those, so you said you attend meetings and financial meetings. Are you still kind of a part of client care meetings at all in your role as a food service director?
I'm not, because I do have a full-time dietitian that
Okay.
goes to the care conferences and meetings, as far as the care of the residents. But I know there are roles out there in the world where you're a food service director and you only have your dietitian, once or twice a week, and you end up going to those meetings. For me, fortunately, I don't have that. Not saying that I wouldn't like to. I sometimes I feel like I would actually like to, because I feel like it helps when you understand what their situation is, you know, then oh, okay, well, that's why the dietitian gave them this or is asking for this for them. So sometimes, not knowing that is not always good. It'd be nice to know.
Yeah. Although you can't do everything. So it's
No,
like
you can't.
pros and cons. Yeah. Yeah. So what continual education have you diving into over your career?
A lot of times I honestly, for the CDM, they do a lot of regional meetings. So I actually go to those a lot because you can get like 13 to 15 credits in one shot.
Wow, that's nice. How do you find this meeting?
On their website, the ANFP website, they usually advertise the meetings, and I went to one last year, and I've been to like two of them
Mhm.
because with my job, I don't have a lot of time to do credits. I just don't. So I
Yeah.
just look for bang for your buck, and I'm like, oh, I'll go to this meeting and I'll get 15 credits. Great. And I used a lot of them I can use for my DTR as well. So it helps.
Great. So you mentioned not many people know what an NDTR is. Tell me a little bit about what it's been like holding the credential, frustrations, positive things with it, conversations you've had with people outside of the field.
Oh, I remember I remember one time I was working at a nursing home. I was the supervisor there. I was actually doing a dual role there. I was working as a clinical DTR and a part-time supervisor. And the food service director went, a DTR, that's a dying breed. And I'm like, oh my God, really?
That's so sad and dying breed.
Yeah,
Okay. I have not heard a story like that before. That's a first for me.
yeah, yeah. It's frustrating because you see jobs out there that you can do as a diet tech, and you don't get a call back because they're like, well, we want a CDM or we want a RD. And you're like, well, I'm here and I have this education. What about me?
Yeah.
Nobody knows what you are.
That's frustrating.
Yeah,
But it seems you found a loophole finding that certified dietary manager
yeah,
credential.
yep. It definitely helps.
Can you speak to the diversity that you have seen, witnessed, experienced in the field of dietetics?
I think on the East Coast, there is a decent amount of diversity in dietetics. I found in New York, there was a lot more diversity than maybe where I am right now. But I do think there's a decent amount of diversity in dietetics in the East Coast. Um, I think what I'd like to see is a little more diversity in the realm of the RD. Um, and I also don't feel like there's a good bridge between becoming a DTR, especially an associate degree DTR, and the RD. I feel like it's very hard to make that bridge, and I don't understand where the gap is, why it's a little more difficult.
Hopefully, Yeah, well, the podcast hopefully and you being
Yeah.
on here is you being highlighting on this credentials podcast is and the highlighting some of the benefits of it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of moving along going along that with that conversation. conversation. With the 20 plus years of experience you had, is there a moment or a memory that really stood out and made you feel like this is what I'm supposed to do? I really made an impact on a client or a staff member that you have worked with.
I don't know that there was ever really a moment where I was like, this is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing, but it's working. And I've been doing it for a long time. So I guess, for 23 years, it must be where I'm supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that there was ever a moment where I said, this is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing. But I have had moments where I really enjoyed what I've been doing. And I've had moments where I've gone, should I be looking at something else? I don't know. But I'm still here. So
Yeah, still here and thriving. So you went from clinical to food service. Are you ever going to dip your toes in community nutrition?
I did for a little while. I did
Okay.
for a little bit. Um, I did do an outpatient clinic for a few years when I was in New York. It was a developmentally disabled outpatient clinic. And I did work for a little while with a food bank in New Jersey. So I've done some community as well.
And so what would you say is I'm going to assume it's food service, but I want to ask, what do you feel is the best, what is your favorite area of nutrition to work in?
Honestly, I liked community a lot. I really did.
Really?
Yeah, I liked community a lot. I felt like because you're talking to somebody who actually wants to be there, that wants the information, that's engaged. And I feel like that gives you, the feeling that you're accomplishing something. In a nursing home setting, they don't want to be there. They don't, and it's the end of life. And they really don't want to hear about their nutrition. They want to eat what they want and they want to do what they want. But in community, they're there because they want the information and they want to talk to somebody. So I felt like there was a little more of an impact in community.
I hear that. That's a very thoughtful response to that question. And so what would be your advice for an NDTR who's listening to this? Or what would you advise them? What would be your best piece of advice?
Don't get discouraged.
Mm.
Yeah, it's easy to get discouraged in this field with this credential because nobody seems to know what it is or what to do with you. Just keep learning, keep trying, and don't take no for an answer.
Persevere. So it's worth it then.
It is.
You're
It
not
is.
supposed to give up.
Yeah, you can't give up.
Yeah. All right, Marsha, anything else you would like to share with the NDTR audience?
I think that we really need to support each other. Thank you for doing this because we need the credential to be out there for people to know what it is and understand what it is and see what we can do.
Mhm.
Yeah, we really need to support each other.
Yes, yes. And in that idea of supporting each other, I know you're very active on LinkedIn, correct?
I am. I try to be.
So can people follow along and kind of see your posts? I've been following you and I've enjoyed what you're posting. You posted something about a new ice cream flavor, which is so fun.
Oh, I did. I don't even remember that.
Are people able to follow you on or connect with you on LinkedIn? Are you comfortable with that?
That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you sharing your experience in long term care, community, and clinical. You've done everything from tube feeding to managing.
Yeah. Yep. It's weird because I don't think I mapped anything out. It just kind of all happened.
Mhm.
And I just, every time somebody said, hey, you want to learn about this? Okay, fine, let's try it, you know, and this is, I guess, the result.
Successful career, great stories, and honestly, really great skill set that you've
Thank
developed.
you.
Well, thank you so much for everyone listening to this podcast. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next one.